Good morning again, everybody. Welcome back to PostGIS Day. We're on to our second talk of the day, FOSS4G adoption in Danish municipalities. Our guest, Kurt Menke, is here. Good morning, afternoon, evening. Kurt, where are you coming from?
I'm coming from Denmark. This
All right,
afternoon. Yeah.
afternoon. Very civilized. It's a wonderful way to take in Postage Day. It'll be less civilized as the day winds on. Before you start, I'd like to remind everybody if you have questions for Kurt in particular, to use the Q&A panel. That way the questions aren't lost. If you put them in the chat, then we all see them, but they might be long gone by the time that Kurt's available to answer the questions. So use the Q&A panel for questions. Feel free to drop comments and random nonsense into the chat. That's great. I think that's it. Share with us. Oh, I gotta stop my share, and then there we go. Can see it.
Right. Great. Well, welcome to my talk. When asked to present something here, I realized that I had this very interesting survey that I could share. So this is going to be a talk on PostGIS without any code. I'm going to talk about FOSS4G adoption in Denmark. My name's Kurt Menke, and I work at Septima. So just a quick intro for me. I'm an American, but I moved to Denmark 4 years ago with my wife in the middle of the pandemic. It seemed like a good idea. And I do a mix of spatial analysis, cartography, and teaching. I'm a QGIS author with Locate Press, and I'm basically an early adopter of open source, including PostGIS and QGIS, and an OSGeo charter member. So when I moved to Denmark, I was hired by Septima, which is Denmark's largest open source geospatial firm. We have about 30 employees at the moment. So just to get us started, I'm a map guy. So where is Denmark and where am I? So we're up here in Northern Europe, this tiny little country with just under 6 million people. And if we zoom in, it's just situated below Norway and Sweden, joined to Germany by a peninsula and east of the UK. So first, Denmark is a highly digital country. Almost all aspects of Danish life are handled digitally. And I found this nice chart that shows the trajectory of Denmark's digital infrastructure over the last 20 years. So this includes almost everything: digital mail, digital banking, digital healthcare records. There's very little paper here. We have even kind of a national system for two-factor authentication for everything we do online. For example, when I bought my car here in Denmark, the whole transaction took about 10 minutes out on the street with my smartphone, including insurance, payment, title, and all of that. So Denmark is amazing in that way. And there's an annual survey, a digital government index, and in 2024, in this OECD Digital Government Index, Denmark came in second in the world after South Korea, which is a measure of the digital platform that government sits on. So Denmark comes in right here in this chart. And so getting into the topic at hand, starting with GIS, there's been a migration in Denmark. So in Denmark, MapInfo was the GIS with the highest market share for many, many, many years. And as MapInfo is getting long in the tooth, we could say, everyone seems to be switching to either QGIS or Esri, ArcGIS Pro. In terms of databases, these are the three databases that are widely used here. There's SQL Server, Oracle, but PostgreSQL seems to be the predominant one, at least in the geospatial realm here in Denmark. So I'm going to get into the results of this survey, which was a survey of Danish municipalities. So it doesn't include the federal agencies or private firms, but just the Danish municipalities, of which there are 98. And the two questions I'll dive into the most are, which desktop GIS software do you use? And do you use PostgreSQL, PostGIS? And this was a survey done earlier this winter, or well, earlier in 2024, during the late winter of 2024, by Jesper Jensen at this organization called GeoFoon. So these are what the 98 municipalities look like on a map in Denmark, just to get you situated here. It includes this one island off to the east, Bornholm. So this is the first result. The question here was, what desktop GIS software do you primarily use in your municipality? And so of the 98 municipalities, there were 50 who responded with QGIS, 25 for Esri, and then still 13 using MapInfo. And there's 9 white municipalities here with no response. And anecdotally, I know that most of them are also using QGIS. So I think this percentage here is going to be up into around 60% likely that are using QGIS nationally. And so on this map, I've got the largest population centers shown here. So those are the 4 biggest cities in Denmark. And just so that you're kind of aware of the lay of the land a little bit. If we look at this through time, you can see the incredible growth of people adopting QGIS over the last 5 years. So it's almost tripled in the last 5 years. Part of this question too was a question about what do you use as your secondary desktop GIS? So maybe you're using Esri as your primary, but maybe there's another one that some people in the municipality use. So if we look at that, 82% of the municipalities in Denmark are using QGIS as their primary or secondary GIS. And I knew it was widespread, but I was a little shocked by this level of adoption. And if we build in some of the ones that didn't give a response to the survey, but we know are using QGIS, this is probably approaching 90%. So here we have a map that shows what that looks like for municipalities using QGIS as their primary or secondary GIS. So in dark green, they're using it as their primary, and lighter green as their secondary. And so you can see, yeah, 82% using QGIS in some capacity. So moving on to PostgreSQL, PostGIS. So here the question was just a yes or no. Do you use PostgreSQL, PostGIS? And 53 of the 98 municipalities responded yes, for 54%, and 34 responded no, for 35%. So that's where things stand with PostGIS in Danish municipalities. And if we look at that through time, you can again see that in the last 5 years, it's more than doubled the number of municipalities using PostGIS. And again, anecdotally, I know that some of these municipalities where the bigger cities are situated, such as Copenhagen and Aalborg, are using PostGIS in some level. So this is probably up for, again, towards 60% adoption. So then I kind of combined these two and just called this map FOSS4G adoption. So this is in green, municipalities that are using both QGIS and PostGIS. In yellow, they're using QGIS or PostGIS. And then we have neither in pink. So between the two, you can say 86% are using QGIS and or PostGIS, which again is, I think, pretty high. I'm wondering if there are any other countries with a similar adoption rate. So those are the results of the survey, and I wanted to get into a little bit on from what after being here for 4 years and talking with my colleagues, a little bit about the perception of PostGIS in Denmark. So what I like here is that it's widely accepted as a stable, robust database option. So there's no controversy about open source here. There's no fear about security or any of those issues that I kind of ran into in the United States. And organizations who are using another solution, such as Oracle or SQL Server, are doing so just because they have business data that's been stored in that database for many years, and it's just not practical to switch, or there's not a compelling reason to switch. And one of the phenomenal things in Denmark is that the majority of the vector-based Danish public data is stored in Postgres. And actually, my company, Septima, is about 10 years old. We were formed on the very day, a little more than 10 years ago, when Denmark put an open license on all of the basic Danish public geodata. And so that's when my firm decided, the partner decided to start our company. So for example, we have a big database called GeoFA, which roughly translates into geographical professional data. So this is data focused on outdoor recreation, trails and bikeways and things like that. So this comes with a specification and a database. It's municipality based. And so municipalities can choose to participate in this and contribute data to this, as long as, of course, they're following the specification. And again, it's recreation and outdoor data. So it doesn't have 100% adoption, but the majority of municipalities participate in this GeoFA database. There's then GeoDenmark, which is the national base map. So this includes things like buildings, parcels, addresses, road center lines, railroads, etc. All that basic ground data is in this database. And then there's this thing called Datafordeler, which is the data distributor. So this is basically a platform where agencies and other authorities can place their data. And so this is basically a sharing platform based on PostGIS. And then there's the data supply, which is provided by a particular Danish agency. And this serves out things like administrative boundaries, hydrology, and base maps built on some of the GeoDenmark data. So all this data is the data that gets used in 98% of the analyses and GIS projects that go on in Denmark, and it's all stored in PostGIS with some of it with very complicated data models and topology checks built on top of it. So then we get into, I just wanted to talk about some of these Danish QGIS plugins, switching back to QGIS for a slide, because these are not only just some Danish QGIS plugins, but there's most of them specifically are there to provide access to these data stored in PostGIS to anyone who needs to use it. So there's the data for Suning, which is basically the Danish national map. There's environmental data, weather data, and the GeoFA recreation data. So there's plugins for all of these so that you can easily pull these into QGIS and work with them. There's also services built against all these layers in these databases so that you can pull them in via OGC services and things like that. And then lastly, I wanted to just talk a little bit about what we at Septima do with PostGIS. So for one, we have some products such as this thing called DataBox. And so this is a product that we offer on a subscription basis. And it's basically a custom set of value-added public data from these databases I was briefly describing. So, we basically have a data provider such as the data supply. We have a mirror of that at Septima. we build some views and do some extra work to some of this data. And then we sell that on a subscription basis to people who need basically a package of this data in their own IT environment. And so they can specify what they want in their data box. And we also provide that it's going to be in sync with the main source. So as changes are made here, it becomes synchronized and they have the live data on their side as well. They can also add their own views and local data to that data box as well. And so yeah, so we sell subscriptions to this. So this is one of the PostGIS based products that we sell in country. And we also teach a lot of PostgreSQL courses to a wide variety of people working at agencies and municipalities. We provide support, anyone needing help with Postgres or SQL or analyses. We do that. And we internally use PostGIS for almost all of our analyses. So we've done some analyses in recent months on solar potential and potential sites for windmills and things like that. And we do all of that analysis in PostGIS. We also use PostGIS as the source for all of our web services and web mapping applications, both that we provide for our customers and that we use in-house. So that is just a brief primer on what's going on in Denmark and just how widely accepted and used PostGIS and open source in general are in this country. So I'll just conclude with my coffee bean map of Denmark. And I know this was a shorter talk, so I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, lots of questions from me and from attendees. I'll start off with the sort of general one you might have covered at the beginning. Like, how did you get all these 100 municipalities to answer that survey?
Well, I didn't run the survey.
Right.
This was done by a gentleman who lives in the middle of the country and created this survey himself so that he could understand the how various municipalities are using IT. There were other questions beyond what I covered, even questions about how they used AI and machine learning and things like that as
Yeah.
well. But he did this survey and then presented it, and then I asked him if I could have the anonymous results, and so I took that and ran with it and made some extra maps to
Yeah.
show graphically what came out of it.
Well, it's a wonderful piece of data, and it's a cool testament to the power of incumbency and how like change tends to come through in waves. Do you have any
Mhm.
sense? So MapInfo managed to hammerlock incumbency, whatever, 20 years ago, presumably. Do you have any sense like what happened in the pre-MapInfo era? Oh, it actually kind of ties into a sort of another question, which from Diane, which was what is Odense's what was Odense's other for primary JS? Like the primary JS was MapInfo or Arc or QGIS, but there was like one.
Well, I question that too because that's actually that town is where the man lives who did this survey. So he lives there, and I know they use both QGIS and PostGIS. So why they answered their own survey that way, I'm not sure. It was
Yeah.
strange.
Okay, so that's an outlier for sure.
Yeah.
Um, any obvious reason why the Esri municipalities seem to be grouped on the western coast? Is it the direction of the wind, ocean, something like that?
No, I don't think so. Those tend to be kind of more rural, um, yeah, isolated municipalities in a way. So I don't,
Yeah.
but I really don't know why they're
Well, that
within
holds
the.
up for me, and I feel like when I look at say counties in the United States, what do they choose? What could they reasonably support as well? You know, going with the a lot of the benefits of open source, things like flexibility and ability to integrate into larger systems and so on, are just benefits that small organizations aren't able to take advantage of. And then they also
Yeah.
self-reference a lot. So. what's the neighboring county doing? What's the neighboring county doing? So you can get these sort of waves of adoption. Um, I guess maybe this survey does have the information for this question. I was wondering whether where these municipalities host their Postgres databases. Are you seeing, is there a tendency for in-office install, or is it everything moved to cloud? Is it self-hosted, self-managed, or
I think a lot of people are using
yeah,
cloud storage. We are,
yeah,
um, but I can't speak to everyone. I'm sure some people have a server in their office somewhere, but I think I'm guessing most are using cloud storage at this point.
yeah. So QGIS is clearly in the lead as this migration shift from MapInfo is happening. Is there a reason for the high uptake?
Well,
Do you think it's
Danes tend to
like,
be very practical,
yeah,
and when they see something that I think they get into it for the no economic, free as in free beer reasons. It doesn't cost them anything. It solves their solution. That's
yeah.
it. Very simple.
Was, was there a ground zero?
That's a good question. I haven't been here long enough to know. I really,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because I feel like there
But
has
I
to be.
imagine it was Copenhagen,
Ah,
which is kind of
okay.
the intellectual hub.
Yeah. Well, I would think that like smaller municipalities might sort of rebel against that. Oh, Copenhagen's doing this, so we're going to do something else.
There could be that too.
I bet there's somewhere in there there's some person, right? Who's like, I am the disciple of
Champion.
QGIS, and I'm going to tell everyone how great it is, and it's always the reference thing, and the reference client is important. So
Yeah,
it'd be interesting to
absolutely.
know what that original seed was. Um, do you know of any similar surveys for the United States?
I know only about educational surveys. There was a survey that Philip Davis did in the US where education, like 98% of the educational post-secondary education programs in the US were using or based on Esri.
Yeah.
But I don't know about use. The US is such a big, complicated country. I think that's a difficult thing for people to know.
Yeah. Um, in terms of working in GIS in Denmark, are there any places where someone could go to find job opportunities in Denmark, like a central clearinghouse?
No, it's difficult. I feel lucky to have found a job. Being able to speak Danish is um, ver pretty much a requirement. I have learned Danish in the 4 years I've been here. So finding a job if you're not a Danish speaker is very difficult. Um, but if you were to find a job, you would focus on one of the universities, like University of Aalborg, University of Copenhagen, um, or one of the big agencies like the Danish Meteorological Institute. Some of those very big agencies that are based in Copenhagen are basically English speaking offices and do a lot of you know pretty heavy GIS analysis, both database and other. So those would be interesting places to look.
Do you have a sense that like what's the gateway drug for flipping? Is it using QGIS and then using Postgres and PostGIS, or does it happen the other way around?
I think it's almost independent. I think the for some reason the fact that Denmark is such a digital country, the databases have clearly been established here for a long time. And
Mhm.
so I think people are used to working with them. Um, I think their database skills, on average, in my experience, exceed their desktop GIS skills.
Hmm.
So a lot of the GI, like the QGIS users do very basic things with QGIS. I don't find a lot of sophisticated use, but it's widespread. The simple use is everywhere. But everyone seems to be pretty savvy with knowing how to work with a database here. It's interesting. Yeah.
A follow-up on folks working in the cloud. Are they working on like cloud databases that are fully managed, like RDS or Crunchy Bridge? Are they self-managing in the cloud? Is it Docker images or packages?
Yeah, so I can only speak to us. We use Docker images and we maintain our own databases. We have a staff of
Yeah.
backend specialists who manage all that. So, but I'm sure there are some who are using some easier setups.
Right. And last question is, can you explain how municipalities are working with the database, roles and permissions and so on? Do you have a sense that they're using it to its fullest extent?
I believe so. Yeah, I mean, I think security is pretty locked down, and so um, the vast majority of people are just going to have read access or the access that they require for doing their job. And so I do think they're using permissions very well
Yeah.
in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Kurt. It's been great having you, and thank you for sharing that information about PostGIS use in QGIS use in Denmark.